Traders, how are you? Marcello here, founder of the Day Trading Academy, co-founder of Speed Up Trader, where you guys can come and apply to use our money trading live in the markets for just a process of $120 with accounts starting at $25,000. Today, we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Overall, this week, there was an overarching piece of news that affected absolutely everything, and that was the trade war with China and the US. If you guys have any questions, don't forget to leave them with the hashtag AskMarcello. The podcast is available. If you guys want to hear the podcast Monday morning, see what happened in the markets last week, Spotify, iTunes, it's available everywhere. And also, if you guys are watching here on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to leave a review for the podcast, would be great. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram as well, Wandering Trader for now. So with the overarching news of the trade war, essentially Trump threatened in the beginning of the week to basically go to rise the percentage, the tax that essentially he was going to charge China from 10% to 25%, and he blamed it on China. So Monday he threatened that. On Tuesday, the market losses accelerated. The financial markets obviously were trying to get a hold of what was going on. Stocks ended up mixed on Wednesday, and the U.S. stocks fell again on Thursday as they were again focusing on the situation between U.S. and China. The U.S. stocks averted the worst weekly run since late December 2015, worst since March after closing higher on Friday. And Friday, as promised, Trump did increase the tariff rates on $200 billion in imports from China to 25% from 10%. Overall markets for the week, Dow was down 2.17%. S&P 500 was down 2.26%, and the NASDAQ was down 3.12%. Overall overseas market news as well, mostly affected by this as well. Most of the markets were down as well. A lot of investors expressed concern about the situation between U.S. and China. The biggest losses were from China. The European markets fell far lower. The Paris SAC 40 went down 4.19%. The even bigger loser in Europe, if you consider Turkey part of Europe, was Istanbul, 6.11%. Latin American markets were mostly negative. Mexican exchange was 2.09% negative. There was a sliver of good hope in Argentina. That was one of the only markets positive in Latin America. The Merval in Argentina, 3.20%. Africa and Middle Eastern markets, as Saudi Arabia was the biggest loser, mostly lower as well at 5.42%. And Asian markets as well, mostly lower for the week, with the Hong Kong HSCEI falling 5.19%. In Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news, hackers stole Bitcoin worth $41 million from Binance, which is one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world. In the latest string of thefts, they stole 7,000 Bitcoins, which is about 2% of the total firm's holdings, but don't worry, it's safe. CipherTrace cybersecurity firm said that $1.2 billion was stolen in quarter one of 2019. That includes outright theft and also digital scams. So the theft alone, where they stole it, was $356 million. The rest was actual fraud. So you guys can see that there's a lot higher number of fraud. That's why I always tell you guys to be careful with those markets. Remember what happened, if I'm not mistaken, in February of this year with the exchange in Canada, where the owner died or disappeared or whatever the news was, right? There was a lot of fishy information there, and the Canadian government basically wasn't going to do anything because they're not regulated. Bitcoin gains for the week, 10.99%. They went to 6,346.45. In financial news, the U.S. Fed is reporting that the U.S. stock prices are elevated, but the business debt is at historic levels. So one of the things that they want to say as well is that the financial system does appear resilient. There's a lot low levels of leverage and less of the destabilization, or less likelihood of the destabilization of the markets in more than anything the key markets. Turkey is in another currency crisis now as the lira hits the lowest level since a year. Essentially, they had a voting in Istanbul, and they overturned the authorities overturned the results because the other party actually won. The lira fell 16.3% against the dollar in 2019. Only the peso in Argentina fared worse among all the G20 nations. China does have a powerful financial market arsenal to be able to do a trade tussle with the U.S., their own weapons more than anything, the huge pile of U.S. treasuries that they have and their own currency. But using those weapons in a trade war is going to come at a cost. U.S. Treasury yields are lower for the week. Remember the lesson that I told you guys with the Treasury yields when the longer term yields cross the lower yields. So when the longer term go down and the shorter term go up and there's an inversion with those two rates, that's an indication generally of a recession. This year, the 5-year went down to 2.26 and the 2-year went down as well to 2.31. So the 5-year and the 2-year are already inverted. They can uninvert, but essentially you guys get the drift with that indication. Commodities overall are down for the week. The U.S. crude went down to 61.67, 0.52% negative for the week. International Brent went down 0.27 at 70.72. Iran's oil minister warns that the OPEC is in danger of a collapse as a lot of the members are seeking to undermine fellow members. Referencing obviously to Saudi Arabia that said that they would pick up the slack when it comes to the gap created by the U.S. sanctions on Iranian exports. The World Gold Council is estimating central banks bought more than 715 tons of gold. Essentially, this is a piece of news that it's basically the de-dollarization. A lot of emerging economies as well, and central banks are accelerating their gold purchases to become less dependent on the dollar, which is a progress of de-dollarization. In the last 12 months, through March 31st, 2019, they've bought $30 billion worth of gold. 75% of the U.S. central bank reserves are in gold, 70% for Germany, 18.5% in Russia, and rising because they're buying a lot. And China's at 2.5% if you believe the stats that come out. And I know a lot of you guys probably watch the news. I personally never watch the news because I believe a lot of them just give the opinion of what they want you to believe, not the actual facts. Remember, I'm never going to get political on the show, whether you are left or right, love Obama, hate Obama, love Trump, hate Trump, doesn't matter. I just want you guys to be able to learn with these videos, right? So if you watch a lot of these news, a lot of them say, gold is a relic, you shouldn't buy it. And even a lot of people say Bitcoin is the new gold. Why are so many central banks buying so much gold if it's not valuable? See, always watch what people are doing, not what they're actually saying. Gold for the week went up 0.53% to $12.86, and silver went down 1.01% to $14.84. If you guys watched the videos that I did about how I'm trading right now, I uploaded a video a while ago on the Spanish side, but I drew a circle and I uploaded the video about a few weeks ago, so you guys can see literally silver went right down to that area I was looking for. And we'll most likely see a recuperation of the silver. It'll come back up once we have some kind of trade deal. If and when that happens, hopefully it's soon. The economy news: Brazilian retail sales in March posted their biggest annual decline in more than 2 years. Government stats indicate on Thursday big concerns about the economy as it's struggling, and there's a possibility that there was a contraction in the Brazilian economy in the first quarter of 2019. Corporate news: Airbus shares are down 2.6% after a plan to potentially sue the German government for a deal worth $3.3 billion. They were going to finish a border security system for Saudi Arabia that the government of Germany actually froze. German automaker BMW's quarter profits in quarter one went down 78% to $660 million as their automotive division posted a loss. They set aside funds as well for a possible EU antitrust fine of $1.6 billion to pay fines for an emissions scandal. Amazon is opening its 12th high-tech convenience store in New York, the first one to accept cash. And Uber came out public this week in their first IPO, valuing shares at $45 a share on Thursday, making it one of the largest IPOs ever with a valuation of about $82.4 billion. In the process, they raised $8.1 billion. The shares did go down lower on Friday. In trade news, the UK Prime Minister May is offering in shape of a customs union deal until 2022. The next time they have a general election, the Labourers could essentially offer voters a full customs union, while the future Tory government could pursue a looser relationship with trade deals for other nations. Essentially, they just want to kick the can down the road again to try to make some kind of deal happen. In U.S. goods and trade deficit with China, a focus on Trump's America First agenda. The deficit dropped to a 5-year low and 16.2% in March by 20 billion. Amid a surge in exports, including soybeans, the U.S. exports to China actually rose 23.6% in March. The overall U.S. trade deficit is up 1.5% in March, but the gap with China continues to narrow amid the trade dispute. In technology, new Pixel smartphones with a new OS called Android Q. Google is going to start to focus on gaming. Likely is going to focus and present this information at their I/O Developer Conference. It's a 3-day event for developers and hardware makers that began on Tuesday of last week. Lyft is soon going to be offering rides in self-driving cars operated by Google's Waymo in Phoenix, a suburban area in Phoenix. It's going to be the first of a bigger commercial deployments of robo-taxis so far that a lot of tech and auto firms are working together to implement. In investment news, Apple has $225.4 billion in cash. They've announced that they often refrain from announcing the companies that they do purchase the smaller firms. CEO Tim Cook says that they've bought a company on average 2 to 3 every week. They scooped up about 20 to 25 businesses so far in the last 6 months, and they're looking for intellectual property and talent. Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's company, their operating income rose 5%. Thank you to Geico, helped by Geico, the insurance company, and a company called BNSF Railroad. They did not reach the analyst forecast, but they repurchased $1.7 billion worth of stock. Reflects Buffett's difficulty in finding investments for $114.2 billion. Tesla's relief bid for the U.S. 25% tariffs on Chinese-made autopilot brain on its Model 3 has been rejected. So essentially, the brain of their autopilot, which is built in China, is going to be charged 25% if it comes to the U.S. It's one of more than 1,000 product denials linked to the China's Industrial Development Plan's exclusion requests. U.S. is spending about over $75 billion in mascots this year. Walmart wants to be able to have over 100 veterinary clinics in its stores in the next 12 months, growing from the 21 that they have today. And they also want to launch an online pharmacy to get a little piece of that $75 billion market. And also tensions between drivers and ride-hailing apps flare again. Uber and Lyft, there was a lot of protests. The protests are essentially over low wages and unstable working conditions, and Uber is saying that they're not going to treat their workers as employees. You guys need to know that these companies are losing billions of dollars a year. So I don't think that they're going to be very willing to give you guys more and more benefits. Not saying it's not worth it or you guys don't deserve it, but think of the grand scheme of things, okay? In international events, there was a ceasefire to end a surge of deadly violence in the Gaza Strip in southern Israel. There were 650 Palestinian rocket attacks on Israel, which prompted a return on airstrikes from Israel in the region. U.S. is deploying carrier strike groups and bombers in the Middle East in response to troubling indications and warnings from Iran. Essentially, they want to retaliate by showing the unrelenting force to any attack. The Iranian President Rouhani also said that he advised the remaining people that are on the nuclear deal, which is the UK, France, Germany, and Russia, that they have 60 days to implement the promises to protect Iran's oil and banking sectors. Europeans rejected Iran's pressure and said that they might threaten, or they essentially threatened to reimpose the sanctions. And the president said they either follow the U.S. lead or they engage in Iran in violating U.S. sanctions. In a show of naval force as well, in the South China Sea, U.S.-guided missile destroyers conducted drills with a Japanese aircraft carrier, 2 Indian naval ships, and a Filipino patrol vessel in a waterway claimed by China. In an unusual fact this week, Chris Hughes, which is the person responsible with helping Mark Zuckerberg grow Facebook from a dorm room company to the conglomerate that it is now, is saying that he has way too much power and it should be broken up. He says that Zuckerberg has, quote, unchecked power and influence, much beyond any of that of anyone else in the private sector of government. Avengers Endgame surpassed the 2 billion mark. Only 5 movies in history have actually done so for unadjusted for inflation. Avatar, the previous record holder, was the quickest film to $2 billion, which was 47 days to reach the benchmark. Iceland is going to try to boost tourism and make life a little bit more enjoyable for its citizens with geothermal heated biodomes to grow exotic food and provide comfort. Since the winter lasts 9 months, there's a bit of a situation with a high usage of antidepressants and limited opportunities for farming in Iceland. Disney has also purchased the rights to Avatar, the all-time global box office champion. They're going to delay the release of Avatar 2 by a year to December 21 and also push back Avatar 3, 4, and 5 to 2023, 2025, and 2027. And Disney's Skywalker saga wraps up this Christmas with the 9th entry to the series. There's going to be 3 more Star Wars films that are going to follow in December 2022, 2024, and 2026. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And let me know if you guys have any questions with the hashtag AskMarcello. We'll see you next week.